Her daughter forged her signature on a lease for land she never asked to borrow. Carolyn Bishop, retired broker and widow, didn't flinch. Vanessa called it a clerical shortcut. The state called it fraud. By week's end, her daughter was suspended, the board was gutted, and the lot they planned to steal broke ground under a different name. She'd spent a decade folding napkins and being parked near the trash. Now she sat at the head table, with the deed, the vote, and the final word. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. She made me sit by the water cooler, next to the trash bin, the kind of placement you give someone you've already erased. A folding chair with one uneven leg, wedged between a cracked ficus and the clunking hum of an ancient mini-fridge. No name placard, no spare agenda. Just the faint scent of mildew and lemon-scented cleaner fighting a losing battle in the corner. The monthly HOA board meeting was already in full swing when I stepped into the community room, cool air conditioning prickling against the Florida humidity clinging to my arms. Vanessa was at the head of the polished oak table, all crisp white blazer and controlled charisma. Her voice floated through the space like a real estate jingle. Confident, curated, hollow. "Let's keep it tight today, folks," she said, tapping her tablet. "We've got budget amendments, the community center proposal, and the landscaping vendor issue. Shouldn't take more than an hour." She didn't look up, not even when I nodded toward the seat beside her, the one with a fresh bottle of water and a leather-bound meeting folder. That chair went to Gary Becker from Unit 7D. His only claim to fame was a 2-year stint selling life insurance before retiring into a recliner and conspiracy forums. I walked to the back without a word, sat beside the trash bin and took out a pen, though there was nothing to write on. My fingers itched for paper anyway. Vanessa finally acknowledged me, if you could call it that, when a new board member, a nervous redhead named Colleen, whispered, "Is that your mother?" Vanessa laughed, not cruelly, just dismissively, like brushing lint off a blouse. "She's just here for decoration. Don't mind her." A ripple of chuckles moved around the table. Even Gary smiled. My jaw didn't twitch, my hands didn't fidget. I simply inhaled citrus cleaner and warm plastic from the nearby water cooler, and exhaled nothing. The meeting rolled on. Vanessa wielded her charm like a baton, guiding conversations, steering concerns. She framed the new community center proposal as a legacy project, something that would elevate property values and connect generations. She even referenced a generous, undisclosed landowner who'd been willing to talk terms for the adjacent lot. I knew the parcel she meant. I knew it down to the weeds that grew along its fence line. When Vanessa moved into this building 5 years ago, she cried when she saw the listing price, said it was the one she wanted but couldn't reach. I didn't say much then, just wired the down payment that same afternoon. Told her it was an early inheritance. She thanked me with a bottle of wine and a brunch I paid for. That was the pattern with Vanessa. Bright packaging, thin contents. Her affection came in curated gestures, like Instagram filters slapped over hollow moments. Back in the room, the motion to approve preliminary funding passed with raised hands and murmured ayes. No one asked about permits. No one asked whose land they'd be building on. Vanessa stood to close the meeting, sweeping the room with a smile. "Exciting things ahead," she said, her eyes skating past me like I was another outdated brochure in the lobby rack. I didn't clap. I stood slowly, letting the legs of my chair scrape loud against the tile. Some heads turned. Vanessa didn't. Outside, the late sun was low and brutal, casting long, gold-tinged shadows across the sidewalk. I walked past the valet station, past the newly planted palms, past the plaque with donors' names etched in bronze. My name wasn't there. Back in my unit, cool, quiet, my own, I sat at the mahogany desk I'd kept since before Vanessa was born. Opened the bottom drawer, reached past the warranty files and old wills, pulled out the heavy, bound folder with the black elastic strap, the commercial property file, tucked away for years, quiet, sleeping. I ran a hand over the deed, the survey map, the unassuming LLC name that shielded mine from public view. Folded beside them was a printout of an offer made years ago, one I never returned. Vanessa had been busy building her image. I'd been holding the land she thought she could borrow against. People ignore women like me until we hold something they want, like property rights. Then suddenly, we're interesting. We're threats. We're questions no one thought to ask. The next morning, I walked 2 blocks north under the sharp bite of Tampa's sun, my cardigan damp at the shoulders before I reached the sidewalk's first crack. The lot sat like it always had, just east of the condo complex, wrapped in chain-link fencing, sun-bleached signage leaning from rusted posts. Wild grass curled through the gravel. A forgotten space, but not to me. I'd bought it 24 years ago, when commercial real estate felt like chess and not roulette. It was cheap then, unfashionable. Vanessa had just started high school, and I needed a place to channel grief after my husband died. So I picked dirt. Silent, stubborn dirt. Now I stood at its edge, watching the new laminated poster on the HOA bulletin board zip-tied to the fence. Coming soon, Community Center Project, pending final lease. It bore the HOA logo and Vanessa's name in the fine print. Project Lead. I didn't smile. I didn't blink. I walked the perimeter, tracing the metal fencing with my hand like I was reading Braille. My name wasn't on the sign. It never would be. I'd buried ownership under an LC, CB Holdings 3, created back when people didn't pry into women's retirement portfolios. My accountant had filed it without question. Even Vanessa had no reason to suspect. She was too busy perfecting her open floor plan dream life to ask about my check stubs. I crossed the street and stepped into a quiet cafe with good Wi-Fi and bad coffee, ordered an Americano I wouldn't finish, and pulled my laptop from my tote. I still used a desktop at home, but for this required movement, distance, secrecy in plain sight. Within minutes, I'd confirmed what I suspected. The HOA minutes outlined lease negotiations for the lot, my lot, but only referred to the owner as pending final agreement with CB Holdings 3, LLC. Vanessa had spoken at 2 community forums about the plans, never once mentioning me, not even as a footnote. I called Martin Levine, a transactional attorney I used to refer high-dollar clients to back in my day. He owed me, and he still picked up on the first ring. "Carolyn Bishop," he said, voice gravel and memory. "Haven't heard that name in a decade." "I need discretion," I said, and a fast answer. "Always discreet. What's the question?" "What if I wanted to sell the land next to Bayshore Point?" I asked. "The one CB Holdings 3 owns." A pause. Paper rustled. Typing. "That parcel?" he said. "You'd spark a war." "Is it clean?" "Clean as it gets. Your sole managing member. No liens, no covenants, no environmental flags. And you're sitting next to one of the fastest appreciating zones in South Tampa." I let that sink in. He continued, his voice leaning in like we were back in a whispery deal room. "Carolyn, the HOA's got an intent to lease filing with the city, but no signatures, no escrow, nothing binding. If you sell, you're not breaking a thing." "What if I want a full cash buyer?" He chuckled low. "You wouldn't even need to list it. Give me 3 hours and a lunch meeting." Outside, a gull cried overhead, slicing across the cloudless sky like punctuation. The sun bounced off car hoods, off glass doors, off every polished surface pretending to mean something. I stared across the street toward the lot again. Our building rising behind it, my daughter's condo perched on the 11th floor like a throne she hadn't earned, the same unit I'd paid into while she waxed poetic about being a self-made woman. "Make the call," I said. Martin hesitated. "You sure? This'll rattle cages." "That's the idea." He laughed, not out of mockery but awe. "Carolyn Bishop still playing quiet power. All right then." I closed my laptop, untouched coffee still steaming faintly beside it. On the sidewalk, a city worker bent over a storm drain whistling softly. Ordinary morning, ordinary world, only it wasn't anymore. The lawyer laughed. That would change everything. It wasn't the first time she minimized me, just the first time she did it with an audience. That's the thing about humiliation. It's quieter when it's private, but when it echoes off polished floors and plastic water cups, when it draws laughter from men in polos and women in pastel cardigans, it becomes something else, something weaponized. I hadn't confronted Vanessa after that meeting. I didn't need to. I'd spent too many years watching people like her talk themselves into corners. She didn't know I'd already moved a piece off the board. Still, memory has its own scent, like scorched sugar, sticky and burnt at the edges. I thought of all the times she'd turned to me with hands outstretched and expectations high. I paid her New York University tuition in full. She told her friends it was a scholarship. I wrote the check for her first wedding's catering deposit. She called it a joint family contribution. I co-signed the loan for her silver Lexus when she said her credit wasn't mature yet. That car parked 3 spots over from mine, freshly detailed every Sunday, as if wax could scrub history. I hadn't expected thanks, but I also hadn't expected to be repositioned as background. The next board meeting arrived like clockwork, every third Thursday at 6 p.m. The Florida dusk painted the lobby gold, and the scent of overripe orchids clung to the elevator. I wore navy this time, structured, intentional, the kind of outfit that made people pause before assuming. Inside the community room, the seating had shifted slightly. 1 fewer folding chair, 1 more smirk from Gary Becker. Vanessa was already mid-sentence when I walked in. "And with support from the reserve fund," she said, tapping the slideshow remote, "we could break ground as early as August. The renderings are, as you'll see, thoughtful and future-focused." Behind her, the screen displayed a slick digital mock-up, wide glass doors, a mural, toddlers with juice boxes. Not a single word about land ownership, not a single breath about CB Holdings. "We've had early conversations with the landowner," Vanessa said smoothly, "and while it's not final, we're optimistic." I watched her lips carefully wrap themselves around that lie. We? There was no we. The room murmured with approval. Someone clapped once, uncertain, before Vanessa moved on to bullet points about parking zones and multi-purpose rooms. I didn't speak. I didn't move. But my hands, folded neatly in my lap, began to tremble. Not from age, not from fear, from control being drawn in tighter like reins in a quiet hand. Vanessa didn't look my way once. When the meeting adjourned, I stood before the slideshow had even faded to black. Vanessa was still answering a question about fitness equipment grants when I passed her, slow and steady, the scent of her citrus perfume catching for a second on my sleeve. She didn't turn. Back in my condo, I dialed the number Martin had texted me the night before. A buyer, discreet, experienced, ready. "CB Holdings 3, I said into the phone, the parcel by Bayshore Point. "You're ready to talk numbers?" the man asked, his voice calm, clipped. "Northern, maybe Chicago?" "I am." He paused, and when he spoke again, there was something almost reverent in the way he said it. "I've been waiting for someone to wake that parcel up." They wanted to build dreams on land I kept quiet. I was about to make noise. Not with a tantrum, not with a press release, just one signed page that would turn their blueprints into scrap paper. Martin arranged the meeting in a tucked-away glass office on the 12th floor of a downtown building that still smelled faintly of drywall and expensive paint, the kind of place where people shook hands over land they'd never walk and made decisions that echoed longer than their marriages. The buyer wasn't what I expected, no glossy developer with fake tan and showman's charm, just a woman, late 40s, matte blazer, dark red lipstick. Her name was Dana Wexler, and she didn't waste time. "I represent a private investment group," she said, sliding the file across the table. "We specialize in mixed-use pivots. We've been eyeing your parcel for a while." "Why now?" I asked, keeping my voice smooth but unsmiling. "Because someone finally picked up the phone," she said, with a glance that said she knew exactly what kind of quiet power I held. I flipped through the pages. Full cash offer, 0 contingencies, no inspections, no financing delays, no drawn-out negotiations. Clean, almost surgical. "You know this interrupts an HOA project," I said, watching her face. Dana didn't flinch. "We know. But your LLC owns the land, not the HOA. And as of this morning, there's no recorded lease, no binding agreement. This sale is entirely above board. And the plans? We'll break ground before New Year's. It won't be a community center. It'll be retail and executive short stays. Think boutique office suites with rooftop amenities. I let the words settle. Boutique. Executive. Everything Vanessa hated, because she couldn't control it. Dana leaned in slightly. This development will shift the neighborhood's zoning curve. Most of your neighbors don't even realize the impact yet. They will, I said softly, closing the folder. Soon enough. Martin gave me a nod from the other side of the table, his reading glasses still low on his nose. You're in a strong position, Carolyn. That word, strong, wasn't often used on women pushing 70 who wore orthopedic shoes and carried tissues in their handbags, but I knew leverage when I saw it. I built a 30-year career on reading rooms like this one. I looked at Dana again. What do you want from me aside from the signature? Discretion. For now. We'll handle the announcement through our own PR. You'll be out of the spotlight. Good, I said. I've spent enough time as the wallpaper. I'm not interested in becoming the headline. A beat of silence passed between us. Then I reached for the pen, clicked it once, and signed. The moment the ink dried, the ground beneath the condo changed. They just didn't know it yet. Dana smiled, the first real one. You'll receive confirmation of funds within 24 hours. Congratulations. As I stood, Martin tucked the documents into a slim navy folder. You just pulled the rug out from under them, he said under his breath. No, I replied, buttoning my coat. I'm just taking back the floor. Outside, the sky had shifted. That eerie, grainy light that hits Florida before a storm, when everything looks overly sharp and overly still. The heat was wet and slow, and the wind was beginning to turn like it knew something was coming. I walked to my car as the first droplets struck the windshield, wide and warm like spilled tea. My daughter loved strategy, so I gave her one she couldn't predict. No raised voices, no curtain-pulling spectacle, just silence sharp enough to cut through her facade. I didn't announce the sale, didn't leak it to the residents' Facebook group or drop hints in the elevator like she would have. I simply waited. Because power isn't loud, it's patient. It knows exactly when to speak and when to let the walls do the talking. The day after I signed the contract, I attended the HOA Finance Subcommittee meeting, not as a member, but as a note-taker. Invisible, just the way they liked me. Vanessa breezed in 10 minutes late, latte in hand, air-kissing one of the Becker twins like she hadn't just redirected thousands in communal funds toward a project built on someone else's land. I opened a fresh notebook, the real kind, with ribbon bookmarks and heavyweight pages. I wrote everything down, word for word, who motioned what, who nodded in passive agreement, who asked questions, and who was silenced with a smile. Then I went home, opened my file cabinet, and began pulling records. HOA quarterly reports from the past 2 years, line items that didn't match the vote logs, vendor payments signed off without authorization. There were invoices for a marketing consultant who'd never been introduced to the board, a graphic design firm with the same billing address as Vanessa's boutique PR side hustle. It took me 4 days and 3 late nights, lit by a desk lamp older than my daughter's marriage, to cross-reference it all. Then I found it, buried in a scanned PDF of a lease draft from 8 months ago, one that never made it to the public meeting minutes. Was my name, signed electronically, dated, initialed. Only I'd never seen the document. The signature was close, neat, familiar, but I sign with a slight upswing on the Y in Carolyn, always have. This one was too even, too perfect, digital, not mine. I sat still for a full minute. The kind of still where you hear your own body, the rush in your ears, the pulse at the base of your throat, the soft crack of an old joint moving too little. She'd forged me, on a lease, on a legal document, and no one had noticed. I didn't scream. I printed it out, highlighted the signature, and made 3 copies. Then I picked up the envelope I'd already pre-labeled, addressed to the Florida Department of Community Association Affairs, Attention, Oversight and Compliance. Inside went the documents, misappropriated expenditures, backdated invoices, meeting minutes with discrepancies, and the forged lease. No return address. I dropped it in the blue mailbox outside the wine shop on Henderson, the one with the tilted post that squeaked when you opened it. At the next HOA meeting, Vanessa smiled more than usual, likely because she assumed the silence meant surrender. The ground was hers in her mind. She had no idea it had already been sold from under her plans. "Exciting news coming soon," she said during closing comments, eyes sparkling for the crowd. "We're finalizing land access for our new center, and we'll be sending out community surveys in the next few weeks." I took my time gathering my bag, waited until everyone had left, then walked up to the office printer outside the meeting room. A standard black-and-white Brother model, budget-friendly, functional, forgotten by most. I lifted the tray, inserted a USB, and hit print. A notarized request for an immediate third-party audit of HOA funds, citing statute violations and board member misconduct. It was addressed from Carolyn Bishop, Unit 11C, complainant. I printed 3 copies, one for the bulletin board, one for the HOA inbox, and one for Vanessa's glossy blue folder, which she'd left unattended on the table like a flag no one dared move. As the printer whirred and clicked, spitting out pages one careful breath at a time, I thought about how many years I'd spent folding sweaters neatly, signing birthday checks, letting her call me quaint in front of friends. I was never quaint. I was just waiting. The first time she read my name in weeks, it was in bold ink online too, complainant. She didn't even register it at first, too busy flipping pages, still convinced she owned the room. It started like any other HOA meeting. Mild grumbling about landscaping overages, a brief back and forth about pet waste in the courtyard, the hum of the wall unit AC groaning against the Florida humidity. Vanessa sat at the head of the table, radiant in a coral blouse that matched the manicured gel tips on her fingers. She wore power-like perfume, something applied carefully, then left to linger. But then the printer in the back corner came to life, not with the usual monthly handouts, not even with my standard community bulletin reprints. This was heavier, page after page. Each sheet dropped into the tray with a mechanical cough, slicing through the room's rhythm. Vanessa paused mid-sentence. "Gary, did you forget to disable the autoprint again?" she asked, half laughing, half irritated. But Gary just frowned. I didn't touch anything. Curious eyes turned toward the printer. I stayed silent, seated exactly where I always was, near the back, 2 chairs from the cooler, where the plastic cups smelled faintly of soap and mildew. But this time I had brought a folder, and this time I didn't look away when the printer tray filled with legal-grade sheets. Vanessa stood slowly and walked to the printer. She flipped through the first few pages with an amused scoff. Then she froze. Her jaw twitched. Her hand dropped a page. "Carolyn," she said, voice flat. "What the hell is this?" No one had ever heard her say my name like that in a meeting. Not as punctuation. As a challenge. I didn't answer. She turned to the board. "This is fabricated. This is a misunderstanding." Murmurs rippled. Chairs shifted. Colleen, the redhead from Unit 5, leaned toward her husband and whispered something with the word fraud just barely audible. Vanessa tried to gather herself. "It's an unofficial document, probably from a disgruntled—" "It's notarized," Gary said, adjusting his bifocals and peering over the edge of a printed page, "and the recipient address matches the oversight committee." Vanessa's breath hitched. Barely. But I caught it. A lifetime of mothering teaches you to hear the tiniest crack in someone's voice, even when they've spent years raising theirs above yours. "I'm sure there's been some clerical error," she continued, lips tight. "These expenditures were pre-approved." "Were they?" I said quietly. The room hushed. She stared at me. "It's not up for discussion," she snapped. "And this kind of personal attack—" "It's not personal," I replied. "It's procedural." My voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. The words had weight now, tethered to truth, backed by paper, carried on the current of public silence breaking into disbelief. A long beat passed, then Vanessa shoved the packet onto the table and stormed out, heels cracking against the tile. The door didn't slam, but it may as well have. The meeting disbanded in scattered murmurs, like ash after a firework. No one made eye contact with me as they left, except Colleen, who lingered by the door, eyes wide with something that looked suspiciously like relief. That night, I poured myself a glass of boxed Chardonnay, the kind I usually only kept for guests I didn't particularly like, and stood by my window. The city buzzed softly beyond the palms. The parking lot glowed under amber lights, puddles from the earlier storm still catching pieces of moon. Then, a bang at the door. Not a knock. A bang. 3 sharp pounds that made the picture frame in the hallway tremble slightly against the wall. I opened it slowly. Vanessa stood there. No smile this time, just rage. She came to scare me. She forgot who taught her how to argue. Not the woman she imagines now, the quiet shadow in her audience, but the mother who once negotiated down a 6-figure land deal while holding her baby in one arm and a broken calculator in the other. She forgot that Carolyn. I opened the door fully. Vanessa stood there, her eyes glossy with fury, mascara beginning to smudge at the corners. She hadn't dressed for a fight. No blazer, no jewelry, just a tank top, flip-flops, and frayed yoga pants that betrayed how fast she'd come storming down 11 floors. "Do you want to ruin me?" she hissed, stepping inside uninvited. "Because that's what this is. You're making a scene. A public scene." I shut the door gently behind her. "You're the one who knocked like the SWAT team." Her hands clenched at her sides. "They're saying there's a state audit incoming, and that it was you who filed. Are you kidding me, Mom? You? After everything I've done for this building? For you?" I tilted my head. "What exactly have you done for me? I gave you a place to feel involved. I included you." My laugh was short and dry. "You sat me next to the trash bin." She ignored that. "And now you're retaliating, publicly, against your own daughter? You forged my name on a lease, Vanessa." Her face faltered. "No, that was an administrative mix-up. I had to move fast and I've moved fast. Before," I said, voice calm. "I never had to steal your name to do it." She blinked, visibly shaken for the first time. "This isn't just petty, Mom. This could tank my career. I'm being investigated. HOA members are turning on me, sponsors are pulling back, and you're just sitting there like some smug Bond villain in capri pants." "I'm not ruining you," I said, stepping closer. "I'm correcting the math. You've been living on borrowed equity, mine, and pretending you earned the dividends." "Jesus," she muttered, turning her back to me, pacing toward the window. "You're unbelievable." "I own what you're trying to lease," I said, evenly. "The land behind this building? It's gone. Closed. You pitched a dream on dirt that was never yours." She turned slowly, like she hadn't really believed it until now. No, that's not possible. That lot's been undeveloped for decades." "Yes," I said, "because I didn't want it developed. Until you decided to paint it with murals and call it a legacy." She stepped forward again, more desperate than angry now. "You didn't even tell me. You blindsided me." "Tell you?" I repeated. "You didn't ask. Not when you used my money for school, not for your car, not even for your down payment. You just took. Then you told everyone you built it yourself." "This is punishment," she said, voice cracking. "Admit it. You wanted to punish me for not putting you in a better seat at the table." I gave her the quietest look I could muster. "I'm not interested in better seats, Vanessa. I just decided to stop letting you rearrange the table." She stood frozen for a moment. Her mouth opened, then shut again. No comeback, no redirect. Just the spinning, rattling realization that the playbook she always used, charm, dismissal, plausible denial, had expired. She reached for the doorknob with more force than necessary. "You don't know what you've started." "I do," I said. "I just know how to finish it too." She opened the door and left without another word. I didn't follow. I didn't even move until her footsteps disappeared completely down the hall, swallowed by the elevator's mechanical hum. 2 days passed. She didn't speak to me, didn't text. The building went oddly quiet. No emails, no meetings. Just the pulse of something shifting beneath the surface. Then, on Saturday morning, I looked out my window as a crew in neon vests staked thin orange flags into the gravel lot. Demolition signs went up on the lot. At 7:02 a.m., the first backhoe clawed into the gravel lot like it was peeling away history, metal teeth grinding into earth. It wasn't loud at first, just the low, steady churn of inevitability. But by 7:04, the drilling started, sharp, angry, and unapologetic. From my window, the condo's mirrored glass cast long reflections over the site, as if the building itself was forced to watch. Vanessa's unit, perched 2 stories above mine, had its curtains drawn. She didn't come out onto the balcony that morning. She didn't want to be seen losing control. The workers moved with factory precision. Tape lines, soil flags, marker paint on the asphalt. Dana Wexler had kept her promise. The parcel was in motion before Vanessa could find a loophole to wedge her authority into. Later that afternoon, the lobby was buzzing louder than the machinery. Residents huddled in 2s and 3s, holding coffee cups and theories like it was Sunday morning gossip hour. They're turning it into a strip mall. I heard luxury apartments. No, someone said it's a parking garage, can you imagine? One woman from the 8th floor leaned in toward me like we were in on the same secret. Do you know who sold it? They're saying it was someone local. I just smiled gently, like a woman who hadn't just detonated a foundation beneath her daughter's ambition. By day 3, Vanessa had called 2 informal listening sessions in the media room, a PR attempt to get ahead of the storm. I didn't attend. But Colleen did. She told me Vanessa spent the first 20 minutes blaming municipal red tape and development miscommunication, carefully avoiding words like sale or ownership. They're using the south entrance now, Colleen whispered with a wry grin, so no one has to look at the bulldozers. The next morning, I found the first note. It was folded precisely, no name, no handwriting I recognized, slipped beneath my door like a dead fish on ice. You're ruining the community. I held it between 2 fingers like it might stain. No punctuation, no signature, just entitlement printed in black ink. That was only the beginning. Over the next 4 days, they arrived like junk mail from another dimension, folded, slipped, sealed in cheap white envelopes. Hope you're proud of yourself. People like you should lose your voting rights. Enjoy the view. You killed the heart of this place. Each note went into a leather accordion file I labeled in gold Sharpie, proof of why I did this. I didn't shred them, didn't cry, just fill. Add them beside my audit paperwork and contractor updates, because this wasn't just excavation, it was exposure. And exposure always makes people uncomfortable. On the 5th day, the mailbox lobby was strangely quiet. No music playing, no fake eucalyptus in the corner vase, just the hum of fluorescent lighting and the distant screech of machinery from the lot. I opened my mailbox. Inside was a crisp ivory envelope, heavier than the usual community flyers. The return label read, Bayshore Point Homeowners Association, Board Affairs. I peeled it open slowly. Inside was a single half-sheet, bold font, no greeting, just a header. Emergency board meeting. Scheduled Friday, 6 p.m., mandatory attendance. I folded the notice back in half, slipped it into my purse. The wind outside had shifted slightly, warm but edged with the kind of salt that told you summer storms were circling just offshore. This time they didn't hand me a folding chair. I brought my own. At afternoon with navy leather, subtle wheels, the kind of chair that doesn't scream for respect, it just assumes it. I rolled it into the HOA meeting room at 5:58 p.m., 2 minutes early, the same way Vanessa used to enter, like time bent around her. Tonight it didn't. The air was stiff with tension. Not anger, exactly. More like everyone had swallowed the same stale truth and didn't know where to spit it out. Vanessa stood near the whiteboard, already mid-conversation with Gary and Colleen, her blazer a deeper shade than usual, almost funeral black. Her lipstick was red, power red, damage control red. She didn't look at me when I entered, but Gary did, and so did Colleen, and Rachel from 3A, who gave me the kind of slow nod people reserve for survivors or soldiers. I rolled my chair into place at the long table, directly across from Vanessa. For once, I wasn't boxed in the back. I wasn't beside the trash. I was centered. The board president, still Vanessa, technically, called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for coming," she said, voice a notch too bright, like a mask that hadn't been glued down properly. "We're here to address the misinformation that's been circulating and to clarify recent developments that may have caused unnecessary alarm." Colleen cleared her throat. "We're here to discuss your use of HOA funds without board approval." Vanessa blinked. "Well, yes, but there's context. Some of those projects were time-sensitive. Beautification upgrades, community morale." "The signed checks went to a PR firm linked to your consulting business," Gary cut in. Her smile didn't falter, but it no longer reached her eyes. "That's a coincidence." I didn't speak yet. Let her hang herself with words. Vanessa kept spinning. "Look, I understand optics. I do. But these accusations are being blown out of proportion. Someone clearly has a personal vendetta." That was my cue. I stood slowly. No rustling. No throat clearing. Just the smooth glide of chair wheels and the hush that followed. I unfolded a single sheet of paper and began to read. "When someone funds your future, you don't frame them as furniture. When someone gives you their name, you don't forge it. When someone builds a foundation beneath your ambition, you don't call her decoration." Vanessa's face froze, then darkened. I continued. "I've sat through these meetings for over a year. I've watched spending shift without documentation, vendors approved without votes, and contracts discussed without the land secured. That land was mine. You never asked who owned it, because you assumed." I looked up and met each board member's eyes, slowly, one by one. Assumption is not governance, performance is not leadership, and being loud is not being right. Silence, the kind that buzzed in your ears. Rachel from 3A raised her hand. "I move that the board suspend Vanessa Bishop from her role as president pending the results of the financial audit." "Seconded," Gary said without hesitation. Vanessa's lips parted, ready to object, but no one called on her. The vote was unanimous. "Motion carries," Colleen announced. "Effective immediately." Vanessa stood like her spine had just remembered it was made of glass. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" I gathered my folder and slipped the statement inside. "Number, but I'm breathing for the first time in months." I didn't wait for the meeting to adjourn. I rolled my chair back, stood, and left. In the hallway, the hum of the vending machine sounded louder than usual. A cold rush of air hit my skin as I exited into the lobby. I passed the fake orchid near the elevator and pressed the button like it didn't matter anymore, because it didn't. By the time I reached my unit, the mail carrier was already sliding notices into the slots one floor below. I got mine 10 minutes later. A new flyer, cream-colored and official. HOA monthly assessment increase effective immediately due to budgetary reallocation and emergency. Legal fees. The building turned on itself, and all fingers pointed up the penthouse stairs. It began with the flowers. The ones in the lobby urns, usually switched out every 2 weeks by a vendor Vanessa insisted was high-end botanical art. This time they stayed wilted, leaning like drunks against their ceramic rims, petals browned and clinging to stems like bad secrets. Then came the pool closure. "Maintenance," the sign read, though the water hadn't looked cloudy. Someone scribbled "liar" in Sharpie across it. By day 3, a folded lawn chair sat in the center of the lobby with a neon post-it stuck to the back. "Vanessa, you pay your share." I didn't place it there. But I didn't remove it either. Becca's parents, the Wallaces from Unit 14B, became the first to revolt publicly and loudly. They cornered Gary near the mailboxes, arms flailing as they railed about their $1.7 million view being replaced by bulldozers and trash talk. I walked past just in time to hear Mr. Wallace yell, "We came here to retire, not watch Civil War unfold." He wasn't wrong. The atmosphere had curdled. The building, once known for its quiet luxury, had become a whisper factory. People held doors open without making eye contact. Residents who once exchanged banana bread recipes now forwarded emails with all-caps subject lines: fraud, funds, future. Then came the letter from the landscaping vendor, a breach notice taped, rather unceremoniously, to the front desk by someone who clearly didn't care about optics anymore. Past due balance, ceasing service immediately. The palms out front browned by the hour, the hedges bloomed with weeds. Vanessa, suspended but still physically present, did her best to control the narrative. She floated through common areas like a guest at her own funeral. Sunglasses indoors, large tote on arm, always just passing through. But the whispers followed her like perfume she couldn't wash off. You hear she's the reason the assessments went up? Did you see the audit? Line item 44, $2,000 for a logo refresh? She used HOA money like a slush fund. Someone slipped a hand-drawn cartoon under my door. It showed a woman drowning in receipts, while a grandmother in orthopedic flats watched from the shore, sipping tea. I chuckled for a full 30 seconds. The real shift came on a Wednesday. I was in the second-floor library alcove, restocking the paperback exchange. The Brontes were gone again, as always, when a man cleared his throat behind me. "Carolyn." I turned slowly. It was Don Reyes, former board secretary, retired property lawyer, and a man who hadn't spoken more than a handful of words to me since Vanessa's first election. His tie was crooked and his left eye twitched slightly. Stress or caffeine, or both. "I don't mean to ambush you," he said, offering a folder, "but the board's asking for a new nomination. Someone the residents trust, someone who can calm the chaos." I said nothing, just looked down at the folder. Inside was the nomination form. Already pre-filled. Name, Carolyn Bishop. Position, President. I raised an eyebrow. "You already typed it in." "We've had 4 resignations this week," Don said, his voice low and tired. "We need someone who knows this building, who's paid attention. You've earned respect without asking for it, which is more than I can say for half the board." I closed the folder gently. Didn't say yes, didn't say no. He sighed. "Just think about it. Please." I walked past the orchid stand, now empty. Past the cracked tile near the elevator Vanessa had once said she'd replace during Phase 2, past the lobby where no one smiled anymore, except the teenager from 2F, who gave me a conspiratorial thumbs up. I pressed the button. The elevator chimed open, and I stepped inside. I didn't answer right away. I just smiled and walked into the elevator. The nomination form sat on my kitchen counter for 2 full days. I didn't rush. Power earned too quickly curdles into spectacle. I read it once in the morning light with coffee, once more at dusk with a glass of dry wine. The third time, I signed it, neatly, with the upswing in the Y I knew Vanessa would recognize. I turned it in at the front desk without fanfare. No speech, no emails, no platform slogans, just action, steady as bricks. I didn't need to promise change. I was the change. And people noticed. They didn't rush me in the elevator or post about me in the residents group. No, it was quieter than that, slower, organic. It started with Rachel from 3A, who stopped me at the mailbox and whispered, "She told the committee I couldn't host my book club in the lounge because I was bringing down the tone." She handed me banana bread as if it were a secret weapon. Then came Mrs. Gillespie from 10C, who folded a typed list into my palm while I waited for the elevator. My record of when she canceled our shuttle services and where the funds were quietly rerouted. No eye contact. Just information, freely given. Even old Mr. Whitaker, who rarely spoke to anyone without a weather report attached, cleared his throat outside the pool fence and mumbled, "You've got my vote. Took her 3 months to fix the hot tub. 1 phone call from you and it'll be fixed next week, guaranteed." I didn't correct him. I didn't make promises I couldn't control. But I listened. And then, on the 5th day, I posted the only campaign material I would need. A single 8.5 by 11 sheet, centered on the corkboard in the lobby, printed on thick cream cardstock. The good kind, the kind you keep. No bright colors, no clip art, just black serif letters, clear and calm. "I'm not here for decoration, I'm here for direction." There was no name, no picture, but everyone knew. By the time the election rolled around, the atmosphere had changed. The lobby no longer echoed with blame, just anticipation. People straightened their posture around me. Their conversations paused when I entered, not out of awkwardness, but respect. I'd become the eye of a long brewing storm, calm, centered, unshakable. Vanessa didn't post a flyer. She didn't hold a Q&A or schedule a coffee hour. She stayed behind her tinted penthouse windows, hoping silence might shield her like it once did me. It didn't. On election night, the results were posted on the mirrored bulletin in the vestibule between the elevator and the mailboxes. Someone had typed them in bold and even laminated the sheet, maybe to keep the ink from running if someone cried. They didn't cry. They clapped. Election results. HOA President Carolyn Bishop, 87%. Write-ins, 11%. Abstain, 2%. The lobby buzzed like champagne had been poured without corks popping. I heard someone mutter, "Finally." Another voice said, "She's exactly what we needed." I didn't need to say a word. I just nodded once, turned toward the elevator and pressed the button with a hand that hadn't trembled since I signed away the land. My first act as president wasn't loud. I didn't throw a party or schedule a town hall. I didn't make a speech in the community room with the fake ficus in the corner. I opened the board's books, really opened them, and let the numbers do the talking. They were worse than expected. Duplicated vendor payments, inflated service quotes, monthly charges labeled as strategic community engagement that turned out to be catered lunches for 3 people, ordered under initials that didn't match anyone on the board. Vanessa had always been a magician with perception, but even a magician has to pay for smoke. I restructured the budget in one long weekend. No committees, no drama, just a calculator, a cup of tea, and 2 sharpened pencils. The unnecessary contracts were terminated. The recurring leaks, both literal and financial, were plugged. I earmarked a new line item for something the building hadn't prioritized in years: senior wellness. A massage therapist now visits once a week. The community shuttle's back in rotation. The old card room, which had become a junk closet, is being repurposed as a memory cafe. Quiet, soft chairs, books, and volunteers who know how to listen. I didn't announce it. I just let the work speak. But I did add something visible: a set of sleek black dome cameras in the lobby, one above the front desk, one near the mailboxes, and one at each elevator entrance. Not to intimidate, to document. Transparency shouldn't be performative, it should be practical. That's what my presidency became: practical power, quiet recalibration. And while I worked, Vanessa vanished. At first, people thought she was avoiding confrontation, but 2 weeks after the vote, movers rolled a dolly stacked with monogrammed boxes out of her unit and into a waiting SUV. No announcement, no goodbye. Just a folded piece of paper taped to her door that read, "Unit temporarily vacant, renovation in progress." No one bought it. Her kitchen had been remodeled less than a year ago. I'd written half the check. Theories spread like garden weeds. Some said she was staying at a downtown condo owned by her new boyfriend. Others whispered she was retreating to her father's old vacation place in Naples, the one she used to mock for having poor Wi-Fi and too many seafoam walls. Either way, her windows stayed dark, and her mailbox gathered circulars no one claimed. I thought that was the end of it, of her. But Vanessa never let things end without redirection. It happened on a Sunday morning, the kind where the light feels freshly pressed and the air smells faintly of citrus and chlorine. I was coming back from the laundry room, arms full of clean towels, when I saw Rachel from Unit 3A walking toward me in ballet flats and oversized sunglasses. She was holding a velvet envelope, navy, thick, sealed with a sticker that looked expensive just for the sake of it. "I was asked to deliver this to you directly," she said. "By whom?" "Vanessa," she replied, clearly uncomfortable. "She said she knew you by a D. Read it if it came from me." Rachel shifted her weight from one foot to the other. "You should probably sit down." I didn't. I tucked the envelope under my arm, nodded my thanks, and walked back to my unit. No rush, no dread. Inside, I placed the towels on the hallway bench, opened the envelope with a letter opener my late husband once used to slice open brokerage statements, and pulled out a single crisp sheet of embossed paper. Subject: HOA election contestation. allegation of elder coercion and procedural irregularities filed by Vanessa Bishop, date. Received, stamped 3 days ago. The language was formal, but I could smell the panic between the lines. The letter ended with a hearing date. She underestimated how much I'd learned while staying quiet. That was her first mistake. Her second was thinking I'd ever let her use my age as her shield. The hearing was set in a municipal building downtown, the kind that smelled like filtered air and paper dust. Room 204B, a beige box with industrial carpet, one flag in the corner, and a wall clock that ticked too loudly. Vanessa arrived late. Of course she did. She wore a gray pantsuit like armor and carried a purse that cost more than the copier in the front office. Her attorney, young, slick, forgettable, kept glancing at his watch like the outcome might be beneath him. Mine didn't flinch once. Her name was Delia Marks, and I'd met her through a former client 15 years ago. I'd never needed her until now, but I kept her number saved under quiet fire. She sat beside me with 3 binders, 1 tablet, and 0 hesitation. When Vanessa's attorney began with words like emotional manipulation and undue influence over vulnerable populations, Delia leaned in and said, not quite under her breath, "This is going to be fun." The judge, middle-aged, no-nonsense, hair clipped tight and voice even tighter, let Vanessa's side present first. They painted me as manipulative, controlling, and using the optics of elder identity to falsely garner sympathy. A term I'm sure Vanessa underlined in red during strategy meetings. They brought up the budget reallocations I'd authorized as president. The shuttle, the cafe, the security updates. Claimed I had weaponized community goodwill to oust her. I didn't speak once during their entire 45-minute attempt at theater. I just let Delia turn the pages of the binder. One at a time, calm as a metronome. Then it was our turn. Delia stood and calmly handed the judge a color-coded portfolio. Inside, copies of all vendor contracts, all resident petitions of support, documented violations from Vanessa's term, including financial records flagged by the state. Nothing exaggerated, just the truth. Boring, relentless, provable truth. Your Honor, Delia said smoothly, this is not elder coercion. This is a course correction, one the community demanded. The judge didn't blink. The forged lease signature? She asked. Page 28, Delia replied. Forensics confirmed the digital signature came from a device registered to Ms. Bishop's campaign iPad. We have timestamps. Vanessa flinched, ever so slightly. After reviewing the evidence and sitting through 2 more dry cross-examinations, the judge pushed her glasses up the bridge of her nose, then said what I already knew. No wrongdoing, just overdue accountability. Vanessa said nothing. I didn't look at her. I stood, thanked the judge, and walked out of the courtroom like I was leaving a particularly long dental cleaning, relieved but unsurprised. Delia caught up with me at the elevator. Want to grab lunch? She asked. You earned it. Rain check, I said, patting her shoulder. There's something I want to check first. She nodded, and I rode the elevator down alone. Instead of going home, I walked 2 blocks to a branch office of Bayside Heritage Bank, the same bank where Vanessa kept her mortgage. The same bank where, years ago, I'd signed a safety clause on her unit. A legacy clause. A quiet one she'd forgotten. I stepped up to the customer service desk and gave my name. The clerk, polite but surprised, retrieved a file from the back, scanned it, then asked if I'd recently submitted an application for refinancing. No, I said. Why? She flipped her screen to show me. Application submitted. Vanessa Bishop, Unit 11. A collateral, partial value inheritance from Carolyn Bishop, 11C status, incomplete, awaiting verification from title holder. I stared at the screen. It didn't surprise me, but it settled differently, like static in my chest. She listed herself as the heir? I asked. Yes, but... The clerk hesitated, then gave a small shrug. We called the title holder on file before processing. Which was? She looked up. You. I thanked her. Slowly. Walked out into the parking lot under a sky just beginning to gray. I arrived early that morning before the building's rhythms began, before the dog walkers, the mail chatter, the scent of brewing lobby. Coffee. The glass case by the elevator stood half empty, holding only a faded flyer about pool etiquette and a crooked holiday potluck sign from December. I'd brought something different. The notice was printed on cream stock, heavy as a resume, the kind that makes your fingers pause before folding. The border was etched in gold foil, not flashy, dignified, like a certificate you frame, not pin. Across the top, centered in serif black ink, Bayshore Point Homeowners Association Executive Update, effective immediately. Underneath, as of this week, the building is under new management. Yours truly. Signed neatly, Carolyn Bishop, HOA President Unit 11C, and just beneath that, a footnote, slightly italicized, like a wink in Times New Roman. Also, the land behind the building? Sold. Use the south entrance. I locked it into the case myself. Key turned smoothly. The glass gleamed under the fluorescence. There was no announcement. I simply stepped back and waited. The first resident to see it was Mr. Kwan from 9F. He paused mid-stride, adjusted his glasses, and let out a small, surprised breath. Then came Becca's mom, who read it, smiled, and muttered, "It's about damn time," before adjusting her headband and heading out. By 9 a.m., there were whispers. By noon, a small crowd had formed. Nothing chaotic, just that unmistakable quiet energy of something real finally being named aloud. Colleen snapped a photo. Gary gave me a discreet thumbs up. Even the delivery guy paused, leaned in, read it twice, and muttered, "Damn, Ms. Carolyn," as he wheeled a dolly of boxed wine past me. A few clapped. Genuinely, light, surprised applause from people who were used to feeling unseen. And Vanessa? She didn't come downstairs. Not that day. Not the next. Her balcony door remained shut. No new Uber Eats bags appeared outside her door. The light in her hallway, motion sensor triggered, stayed dark. The building was hers in voice and posture for years. And now, without that voice echoing through meetings, without the posture of control, she became a ghost in her own elevator column. I didn't gloat. I made tea. I checked on the contractor who was refitting the gym to include equipment with joint support functions. I signed a thank you card for the shuttle driver who returned after Vanessa's budget cuts nearly cost him his job, and I answered every resident's question that day without looking at my watch once, because time moves differently when it finally belongs to you. At dusk, when the glass case caught the last slice of Florida sun, I stood quietly by it, pretending to read the elevator inspection sheet nearby. Watching. That's when I heard the softest steps behind me. "Grandma?" I turned slowly. Luca, Vanessa's son. 13 now. All elbows and awkward charm, wearing a hoodie in 80-degree weather and clutching an iced Sprite like a peace offering. "I saw the sign," he said, toeing the edge of the doormat. "People are saying, you're the one in charge now." I gave him a small smile. "Seems that way." He looked up, eyes steady. Not impressed, but something close to respect. "You're kinda cool now," he said. I didn't laugh. I didn't cry. I just reached over, smoothed a wrinkle from his sleeve, and said, "Cool enough to get lunch with me next week?" He nodded quickly. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like something had finally broken free. Not with sound, but with weight. Spring bloomed soft and early that year. The palms outside unfurled greener, brighter. The azaleas, planted after Vanessa's landscaping contracts were dissolved, actually took root, dotting the courtyard in pinks and reds like someone had finally let the building exhale. For the first time in years, Bayshore Point felt alive, not curated. The community dinner had been my idea, but I never said that out loud. It came together not with fanfare, but with volunteers. Rachel from 3A organized the seating. Gary helped steam tablecloths. Mr. Whitaker offered to DJ until someone reminded him we weren't hosting a swing revival. There were no plastic plates this time. Real silverware. Cloth napkins. Centerpieces made of wildflowers from a nearby park, tied with twine. No vendors, no branding. Just people. Neighbors. Showing up for something more than themselves. I wore navy again. Sharp, clean lines. A brooch my husband once gave me after I closed a particularly brutal commercial deal in '94. I took my seat at the head table without being escorted or invited. It was simply mine now. As dusk spread across the room, I watched flickers of light catch on wine glasses and polite laughter echo through the walls that once held only suspicion. There was no tension, no election talk, no Vanessa, until there was. She arrived quietly, nearly an hour late. Her heels barely made a sound on the polished floor. Gone were the power blazers, the practiced posture. She wore flats and a soft cardigan like someone trying to blend into a painting she once commissioned. Some heads turned, others didn't. No one rushed to greet her. She didn't approach the tables, just hovered near the entrance, hand on her bag, as if debating whether she should stay or slide back into the night. Our eyes met. I nodded once. No smile, no invitation, just acknowledgement. A chapter closed, not torn. She sat at a side table, alone, and for once she didn't try to command the space. She let it happen without her. Meanwhile, at the table beside mine, a young woman with a pixie cut and a stack of note cards introduced herself. Her name was Anya, a local college student studying real estate development. She'd heard what I'd done, the land sale, the audit, the vote, and asked if we could talk sometime. I pulled a small folder from my purse, printed comps, zoning guides, a short list of overlooked Florida parcels with more potential than anyone had noticed. I handed it to her. "Start here," I said, "and trust dirt over drama. It holds value longer." She grinned like I'd just given her a map to buried treasure. Maybe I had. Rachel clinked her glass a few minutes later, rising slightly to toast. "To the new age of the building," she said. "And the woman who didn't ask for a crown, just a seat, and earned both." Applause scattered around the room like soft rain. I lifted my glass, but didn't drink. Instead, I stood, tucked my chair in behind me, tapped my spoon against the side of my glass, once, twice. A gentle ring. The room quieted. I looked at the sea of faces, familiar now, not just by name, but by rhythm. People I once passed in silence now looked at me with knowing, not reverence, something deeper, trust. I cleared my throat, then smiled. "To the ones who stayed seated," I said, voice steady, and still moved the room. Chairs scooted back, glasses lifted. Someone whispered, "Amen." Someone else dabbed at their eyes. I sat back down slowly. No fanfare, no music cue, just the knowledge that the air itself had shifted. And Vanessa? She was still watching. But this time she didn't interrupt. She just listened. I wasn't there for decoration. I was there for legacy. And now it's mine.